we got a fax. At the time, it was fax, not email. And then the first line on the paper is very small. You don't usually watch it, but it says where the fax come from. So we took that, and then we made an inquiry, and we found out that it was from the Secret Service of Congo. So that means and the thing was, okay, we are waiting for you, we know that you're coming, and it was friendly, but the fact that it was coming from there, I knew I couldn't risk to bring my team there. But then, not to have current images of Congo and making a film on Lumumba, that was a real problem at some point. And after a while, I decided, well, I was going to invent the character of this prophet who cannot go back home and who died, and his body has not been recovered. And he became this phantom, this ghost in the streets, empty streets of Brussels. So, and we shot everything in Brussels. You know? So that was exactly the kind of thing that happened when each time I had a big problem with the production, I just turned it into an asset to the film. And one last thing about the voice. At the time, it was politically problematic to leave the collective and to speak as a filmmaker, as an artist. The only person at the time who did that was Sans Soleil, what's his name again? Chris Marker. And after watching Sans Soleil, I knew, okay, I can authorize myself to speak the first voice as an actor myself in the making of the movie. So that was a real important break. And then, yes, that's it. The movie was there.
Bom, essa dimensão que você traz. Essa dimensão que você traz em relação a uma certa influência, né, do Chris Marker, posiciona o filme também como um dos pioneiros dessa emergência do filme-ensaio, né? O filme-ensaio, que agora tem livros sobre isso, que tem toda uma discussão acadêmica sobre isso. Nos anos 80 e 90 havia figuras como Chris Marker e depois você como Lumumba como um marco disso daí, né? Então, dentro dessa questão, dessa decisão, né, eu queria que você comentasse também sobre o aspecto autobiográfico na decisão de costurar a narrativa do filme, né? Você colocar uma figura pública, mas ao mesmo tempo não construir uma biografia, fugir do biopic, né? Mas está lá a história, o testemunho, e tem também essa dimensão particular, íntima, sua, da sua família. Então, você poderia comentar sobre essa relação do íntimo e do público na construção do filme?
Well, the first decision was itself, how do I speak about myself and not appearing to be a sort of egoistical point of view and put myself at the center. That was never my intention, and even politically, that was not the way I thought about film. But because of the genesis of the film itself, which was the idea was to make a fiction film on the assassination of Lumumba. And while we were working on the screenplay, I had to write a sort of letter of intent, and to justify and find why I was making a film on Lumumba. And don't forget, at the time, nobody really knew who Lumumba was, except people who were really engaged in African politics and were in leftist parties, but the white audience didn't know who Lumumba was, And so I started writing that letter, and of course I started writing about my youth in Congo. But I went there when I was 8 years old. I started explaining why my family went there, and it was also because of the dictatorship in Haiti. And then I started writing about my mother, and I realized my mother was the first person to tell me about Lumumba. And also about the Haitian community in Congo and their role, because they were the first black academic to come to Congo to replace the Belgium. And so the personal story was totally linked with the political story. And then I realized that was a film. And that was a film different from the fictional film. And I knew that also that I could make a film that I controlled totally, that I could produce myself, that I would not need to ask permission to anybody. And don't forget, in the time there were not that many black filmmakers in Europe or even in the US. And I had a few elders who were, like Aile Gerima, Charles Burnett, Billy Woodbury, and then of course the Latin American filmmakers, Brazilian, Argentinian, Chilean, but that was it. The young African cinema did not exist yet. So I just decided, okay, it's going to be a documentary film first. And it wasn't until 2000 that I made the fiction film on Lumumba. So that was the main decision, and then the more I was working on it, the more personal it became, and the more, in the same way as I said before about how do you reach people, how do you go through the thick skin of people, and I realized that you have, as a filmmaker, to come with open hand. You cannot hide who you are. You have to say from what point of view you're telling your story. You can't take a very neutral position or the position of God and I know everything and I'm telling you my story or a story and you need to believe me. No, it was important that you can only believe me if you trust me. If you trust my voice, if you trust my story, where I come from. So that was as important as anything else. And little by little, it builds up and in a very organic way. It was never, what can I use, the use of my family movies. I was in the middle of editing, but I never knew, I even did not remember that they could be in a film. Those were like photos like you have. So, and then suddenly I realized what I had as material, that it can become, it's much more than a family history, but it's a movie about the whole community who left their country to live in another territory, their roots, to come back to Africa. So all the significance of that, only came step by step. It was not, people sometimes think that for a film like this, you sit down and you have a lot of piece of papers, and then you write everything perfectly the way it's going to be. No, it's an adventure. It's really something you build, you know, day after day, layers after layers, and you understand it as well, layers after layers, you know, and then when you come to the point, you know, to the finish line, you know, you look back, you say, wow, I would never have imagined that journey, you know.
Só quem já tiver perguntas vai levantando a mão, porque senão eu não paro de fazer pergunta. Já tem uma ali, outra ali, outra ali. Eu vou fazer a última, ou penúltima, ou antepenúltima, aí eu já passo para a Natasha. Então, eu vou fazer uma última. Peck, eu fiquei assim bastante, na verdade, impactado pelo filme nessa relação que você explora do ponto de vista das imagens nas ruas, no transporte público, na Bélgica, né? Um filme sobre Lumumba, sobre o Congo, a partir dessas imagens da Europa, né? A Bélgica, mas aquilo também pode ser uma imagem da Europa. E, ao mesmo tempo, então, isso vai endereçando uma leitura do filme sobre uma relação que vai ser explorada em outros filmes, com outras chaves, mas aparece a dimensão colonialista barra branquitude, né? E tem uma sequência particularmente muito forte, e ela é muito sutil, onde tem aquele conjunto de pessoas com traje de gala, me parece uma ópera, um concerto, e tem uma narração que cria uma montagem muito conflitiva, né? Mas aquela e outras sequências fazem a gente, conduzem a gente para essa reflexão bastante provocativa e, ao mesmo tempo, dentro de uma poética muito específica. Mas esse confronto entre esse mundo europeu e o mundo africano, explorado dessa maneira pela montagem, me pareceu assim bastante extraordinário, na falta de uma palavra melhor. Você poderia comentar sobre essas decisões? E é uma sequência, sobretudo ali, acho que num túnel, que parece que alguém se incomoda, que você filmando, ele fala, não sei. Mas era um diretor, acredito eu, não sei, você e alguém, negros, uma multidão branca filmando contra a multidão, aquilo também cria uma relação bastante interessante.
Yeah, but again, I think we had official authorization. We seek authorization to film, and this reception is a reception that happened once in a year before Christmas, where all the businesses, commerce that deliver everything to the King family, to the royal family. That's their big holidays, where they're all there. They, you know, a lot of them from rich family, from noble families. You saw this man reading those cards, and it's a very elitist circle, and that's exactly the circle that grew up on Congo's money. So I knew I had to have images of them, and not in a, of course it was provocatory, but I wanted to keep a human approach. They were not my enemies, but I wanted to be there and see what would happen. And of course I was not, you know, crazy and go out. I prepared it, and I had a white DP friend, and but I think the prejudice was so, to see a black director that doesn't. I think I was transparent. They didn't see me. And I was just behind the cameraman. I was my 2 hands on his back and directing him. So this circus, I said, we do all the magazine because it was a 16 millimeter. Let's see where it goes because we didn't know the room. We didn't know how big the room was. And we were not sure that we could enter. But that's also the magic of cinema. People see a camera, they don't dare stop you. If you're here, maybe you are allowed to be here. And so when I saw the entrance, and I told my DP, okay, we're gonna go right. And then, okay, I saw some hesitation. I said, no, go, 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 go. And we just enter. It just opened, like water opening, and we went through that until the empty bar at the end. And the whole metaphor was there. The idea that, as I wrote, that, the prophet came as a neighbor. Because the empty place where he roamed all night is near. So he heard a party and he came to say hello. So that was the metaphor. And all those, and the idea was they all look into the camera. So that the camera became subjectively Lumumba. And so that was a whole game with the whole sequence. But those are the things that you try. You don't know if it's going to work, and that's the risk you take. And if it has ended with people coming, you can't film. I would have used it too. It's why it's important to say, okay, whatever happened, you have to find an artistic way to use it because it's part of the film. It says something about the subject and what you're filming.
Natasha,
Tudo aqui,
tipo, animador de galera.
Boa tarde, então, estou ouvindo, está funcionando? Bom, antes de tudo, parabéns pelo filme, né? Acho que seu objetivo era tocar pessoas, esse objetivo foi alcançado, né? O filme é tocante. Eu tenho algumas perguntas, vou tentar ser sucinta nelas, mas a primeira que eu queria saber é, você tem alguns deslocamentos na sua vida, né? Continentais, né? E acho que isso é um aspecto comum de vários intelectuais que pensaram a questão negra nesses últimos anos, né, essas décadas, nesses séculos. Eu queria saber como que esse deslocamento, como que ele interfere, né, nesse olhar que você tem. Por exemplo, para mim fica que é necessário esse deslocamento para enxergar alguns fantasmas onde o concreto já cobriu uma história que ninguém quer ver, né? Então eu queria saber de você, como que é para você enquanto um intelectual da imagem, né, alguém que está pensando em imagem, esse deslocamento. A segunda pergunta que eu faço é em relação ao tempo da montagem, né, a experiência do tempo a partir do filme, e aí, enfim, tanto em termos de ritmo, né, quanto em termos de presente, passado e futuro, porque tem imagens do passado, tem imagens do presente, né, e essa relação, isso é muito perceptível, mas não deixa de falar sobre um profeta, que é sempre alguém que está produzindo uma imagem de futuro, né? Então, essa relação, tanto da experiência do tempo para o espectador, com a preferência do tempo a partir da relação com as imagens, da montagem em si, né? E por fim, eu queria saber da relação ética com a imagem de arquivo, né? Porque eu acredito que no arquivo ficou muito forte, assim, né, a referência, mas tem alguma coisa ali do, não sei, me lembrou Noite Neblina, especialmente quando tem esse homem que é jogado para cima do caminhão, uma imagem muito rápida, mas você vê essa imagem da morte desse corpo, né? Só que é uma imagem rápida, que é o oposto do que o Noite Neblina faz, né? Que expõe essas imagens, mas não deixa de ter uma referência de um arquivo que está sendo usado para reentender, reinterpretar um presente. Então eu queria saber da sua relação ética com o arquivo e como que é esse processo criativo, assim, né? Até que ponto você se permite usar o arquivo para dizer o que você quer dizer.
Yes, concerning the idea of relocation, I never saw this this way. I never, first of all, I was not really asked to go to Congo. My father had to leave. He was in prison twice during the dictatorship of Duvalier. And in '61, the UN came to Haiti to recruit academic doctors, engineers. My father was an agronomist. And he went to Congo with 400 other colleagues. And then we joined him a year after. So that was, of course, the first revelation for me to be on this huge black continent. And the only idea that I had of Africa was Tarzan. And of course, even as an 8-year-old, I just coming out of the airplane, I already realized that everything was false. Everything that I was taught from American movies was false. So I think that was a really important moment. The other thing is, coming from Haiti, Haitian knows their histories. They will learn in school that we came to that island and they were indigenous before us. They were queens, they were kings, and that it's not our land, that we had to adapt to it. And we know of our relationship with the colonials, whether the British, the French, the Spanish. And we have a clear attitude toward that. And we know, and that's what makes a big difference, that we won our freedom on the battlefield. And so you do have another sense of yourself when you go abroad. You don't go abroad expecting you're going to the master's house. You are independent. You're a full person. So, and I think that helped me all through my life. And the other point about relocation is that I grew up in all those places at the same time. While my parents were in Congo, I went to France. I went to the US, I went to school for a year there, then went back to Congo, then went back to France. But my parents stayed 25 years in Congo, so I would go 2-3 times a year. So I grew up in all those places at the same time. I grew up in the US, I grew up in France, I grew up in Congo. And I studied in Germany for 15 years, and so those were my places. And what I think it brought me, it's a sort of capacity to relativize things in the world. It helped me to deconstruct everything. Probably that's one thing I know how to do very well, because I have all those different point of views from the locals. I know exactly how French people think. I know exactly how Americans think, both white and blacks. I know how Congolese see themselves, or Africans see themselves. And so I use that throughout my work, all the time. And that's what I would say about, I think a relocation gives a sense of either exile or either an extraction of something, and it doesn't at all correspond to my feeling of the world of life. Past and present, and it's basically the idea of structure. This is also something I learned very early, even before I went to film school. It was that American cinema and the Hollywood structure was not something that made sense to me. And if you know most of my films, I never had one classic three-story act. I do spiral and many curves, circles, each time on different level and different time frame, and deconstruct each time and also provoke your reaction, because my films have an impact if you participate. The idea of participation is important for me. I don't tell you all the story. I let you build your own story within my framework. I give you hints, I give you signs, I give you sounds, and it's great if it encounter your own story, it encounter your own reference, or it shock your own reference. And that's the game that I like to play, because it's my way to keep you alive in the picture and not just produce a product for consumption. I don't think film should be a consumption. Unfortunately, that's what is happening right now. I'm working on a film about how the world became a world of consumers. That's how we became. There is a sentence of Marx saying that in capitalism, even human relationship became relationship of merchandise. And I was lucky to learn that very early on in my life, and never try to make a product, but always to look for exchange and for to get you inside something where your mind is working, your heart, of course, everything of what you are, participate in this exercise of exchange. So yes, and past and present is also the same. It's I live with the past continually because it affects the present. So it's never a static situation. We are made of all that. We transport all that within our bodies and minds all the time. Our past determine everything of decisions even. So, and I use that as well in my films. Chronology is not something that I recognize. I break chronologies. And by doing that also, I force you to engage, because you're not just, consuming a nice storyline with dramatic arc that are really as you know them and as you expect them, That's to that. And the use of archive, I don't know the film you're referring to, Dark Side, maybe it's another title. Oh, yes, of course, okay. Okay. Yeah, people say that film reminds them that. Maybe it's a reference to Holocaust. Maybe it's the fact that, as I say in this film, you know, genocide, massacre, always in the European mind and tradition is almost like, yeah, they are killing savages. It's not good, but it's logical, you know. And but here the Holocaust is somehow for the first time where a modern state, you know, that's the most developed country, intellectually, artistically, musically. It was the elite of Europe basically decided to kill their own people because the German Jews were German. They were not Jews, they were German first. And then that's where, you know, there is no hiding anymore. The monstrosity is there. It has nothing to do with the brutes, as in my last film. It's the European system itself that has to question itself. So yes, that was a revelation for me, and the whole idea of, you know, the distinction between dead people, you know, like even a dead black cadaver doesn't have the same weight as a dead white person. You know, that's so absurd, but that's the reality, and we see it every day. If in the news, you know, 300 children in Pakistan died, and maybe, yeah, we heard about that. But 20 French people, you know, died, and they are head of states from everywhere coming to the commemoration. You know, so it's so clear the way that human beings have been categorized, and the Holocaust is for me, and you know, that's the event where you said, okay, stop that. You know, all the bullshit. You know, you cannot hide that anymore. You know, so. And archive, yes, I use archive as my main product, not product, instrument, because uh, there are no images that come from people like me in the 19th, 18th century. So I have to use what exists, and I have to use them properly. In this film, by example, when I show you pictures of the human zoo, like they call them, where they took African to show them in sort of human zoo. I make sure I choose photos where the subject are looking into the camera to make sure that they are human. I never use pictures that are stolen, where they can be object. You know, I always make sure I get their humanity. And of course, they are even, you know, in Exterminate All the Brutes, I use images from Nazi officers. But I make sure to choose the ones where the victims are looking to the predator and looking at the camera and saying, I'm human. So and that's how I use archives. I use it as a material, like there are artists in Haiti that use old cars, mechanic parts, and do extraordinary structure. That's what I feel I'm doing too, because I don't have the material. I didn't exist for them before. So I have to find a way, and that's why also I use fiction in Exterminate, because those images that came up reading the journal of so-called explorator, you know, those are basically, you know, journal of killers. So how do you reconstruct that? There are no archive of that. So I use the tool of fiction to show that reality and make you feel what it means.
Eu vou falar em português. Bom, antes de mais nada, é um privilégio poder contar com a sua presença aqui, vendo um filme tão extraordinário como o Lumumba. Eu acho que é um extraordinário. E agradecer a sua presença conosco essa semana, né? Nessa primeira conversa. Eu, particularmente, cresci tendo, e me fiz intelectualmente, tendo como referência esses grandes homens, né? Esses homens-deus. Lumumba, Amilcar Cabral, Samora Machel, Eduardo Mondlane. São grandes homens que perderam a vida, que foram assassinados e que se fazem, nos contextos onde eu trabalho, no caso Moçambique e Guiné-Bissau, eles são constantes no dia a dia das pessoas. Ou seja, a sua mãe falou sobre Lumumba para você, mas as mães guineenses contam para os filhos sobre Amilcar. Em Moçambique, qualquer criança escuta as histórias de Samora ou as histórias de Eduardo Mondlane. E dessa perspectiva eu queria te perguntar como é que o seu filme foi visto no Congo.
This one in particular?
Lumumba.
Well, this is one of the maybe painful part is that when I made this film and then I made in 2000 the fiction one, for me it should have been the beginning of multiple films throughout the continent about Machel, about all those great figures who gave their life for their liberation, Sankara, and that was not the case, and there are many reasons to that, but until today, when there is any commemoration of anniversary of independence in Africa, they are still showing both Lumumba films. And that says a lot about the power structure in those countries and also the power structure in cinema. And both are not favorable for film like this. And even, I think I was able to make that film because Lumumba was so discredited as a person. He was, seen. A lot of the journalists I interview, you see in their way of answering, they were mostly paternalistic, if not insulting, toward the memory of Lumumba. And so I was not grateful for them. I was not a threat, So I had access to the head of security in Congo, who was a Belgian, colonialist Belgian. And at the time, 89, they basically let me do, because, they never imagined that a film like this would exist. And there were no model either. There was no, that point of view did not exist, except from maybe some Belgian filmmakers, but they themselves would not take my point of view, to tell that story. So it was kind of unique. One of the few clearly, how to say, contra movement I had, one of the Belgian founding, where I went to try to get some money, because it's a film about the story of Belgium and Congo. And I remember this woman that I met, and she said, no, we're not going to support your film because we don't see how relevant it is for Belgium. You know, and she looked me in the eyes to tell me that. I said, okay, thank you, and I left. And when the film was finished, it was co-produced by Belgian television, and the sector of former colonial organizations made a big noise about it, and they asked for the RTBF, the Belgian public station, to initiate a debate after the film. They didn't invite me, but they invite experts. But they didn't invite me. But it was, you know, a very tough debate. And 5 years ago, there was an anniversary as well in Belgium, and they tried to forbid the film. The curator had chosen that film, and they tried to, you know, reject it, and there was a protest, so they had to bring it back. So it's still causing problems, and Lumumba is probably the film that is most shown in Congo and Zaire. Every year, every month, every week, you know, there are a multitude of TV channels, private, small, but they all use it and show it, you know. So it's really, when I meet Congolese, you know, different ages, the first thing they say is about this film. So it's really, it made a difference, at least in that part of the world. Yeah.
Thaís, e depois o Batista, né?
Vocês conseguem me ouvir, né?
Sim.
Bom, primeiro eu queria dizer que é um imenso prazer estar aqui. Talvez a minha pergunta pareça um pouco boba, porque é de alguém que acabou de ser impactada demais e, enfim, fiquei muito emocionada, né, de estar aqui numa universidade pública, frente a frente com você. E aí vem questões muito substanciais da vida, assim, né? E do nosso papel também enquanto intelectuais, enquanto artistas. E aí eu fiquei muito impactada com a mensagem que fala que existem várias formas de matar pessoas, um povo, uma cultura, né? De matar alguém. E aí eu fiquei pensando, né, ao longo da sua carreira, como que você viu o impacto das suas obras, tanto para as estruturas, assim, de poder, né, estruturas sociais, mas também para as subjetividades, assim, das pessoas que você foi encontrando, desses eventos, né, de exibição, nos diversos lugares que você já frequentou, como que você viu esse impacto da sua arte nessas pessoas e ao longo da sua carreira, como você foi percebendo o seu lugar nessas transformações. Acho que essa é a minha pergunta. Muito obrigada.
Qual curso você é?
Eu sou da pós-graduação em Sociologia. Isso.
Well, I find it simple for me to answer because I don't really do that. You know, I feel like if I start thinking about that, I will fall. You know, it's like on a bicycle. I nourish myself from the response to my film. I go to the first audiences, public audience, and I travel sometimes, especially when I was younger. But it's not something I indulge too much because it's like you make a baby and you let the baby go. You know, you can't hang on that. I don't want to make a career out. You know, after Lumumba, I had offered of 5, 6 different films for, you know, heroes, African heroes like this, or other countries, and I say no. I didn't want to become an expert because the film I make them from something I feel or an anger I have, and I want to go through that. So I make sure that my decision to make a film is organic, and also, you know, coming from Haiti and being a black filmmaker in a world where, you know, nobody was interested in my stories. So I knew I had to invent my stories. I had to invent my place in the film industry. And I saw what they did to elders, you know, filmmakers before me. And so I never had the luxury to sit back and see what is happening to me, or what is, I made films sometimes, I didn't care if one person would go see it, because I say, I don't care, maybe in 50 years, a new generation will be able to look at them and say, oh, now I get it. So that's my energy, you know, it's don't look back. You know, try to create the most film you can, the most stories you can, because time is short, and if you understand them, good. If not, you know, let's move on. And especially today, you know, like I don't know if some of you have seen I Am Not Your Negro. For me, it was a film where I thought, okay, when the French people would see the film, and it was, you know, widely seen in France, and I went to a few discussions, but I realized in the discussion in the room that there was still a great amount of denial. You know, like some French people were saying, well, it's a problem of America, you know, at those ugly Americans, you know, with their races, etc. But Baldwin have lived 20 years in France and nobody remembers him, you know. And so the impulse to do Exterminate All the Blues came from that, you know. So I use whatever happened after film to work on the next one. And then I knew, okay, I have to make a film where, after seeing it, if they watch it, nobody could say, we didn't know. That was my angle and my decision. I want to make a film that goes to the bottom of white supremacy, of racism, of genocide, of European history, and that anybody who watches cannot be innocent anymore, because we are in a time in our lives that innocence is not acceptable anymore. In Brazil as well. Batista.
Eu não vou fazer uma pergunta. Eu não vou fazer uma pergunta, eu vou fazer uma fala. Eu sou professor de antropologia na Federal do Norte Tocantins e também militante do movimento negro e trabalho com o Cineclube. E o que eu acho, na minha opinião, o seu filme é muito importante que se passe, que seja exibido e discutido no Brasil, porque, em primeiro lugar, nesse país nós estamos, desde 2002, existe a obrigação de estudar a história da África. E as pessoas se recusam até hoje. Muitas universidades nem têm esse curso, né? Esse filme, ele fala de uma pessoa contemporânea. Né? Você chegou a ver Patrice Lumumba, um herói, mas que a maioria das pessoas nem sabe que ele existiu. A gente pensa que isso é uma ficção. Eles colocam Patrice Lumumba na mesma coisa do Pantera Negra, né, que é uma ficção. E é muito importante, muito mais agora, porque nós vivemos num país que 49% é a favor do racismo, da tortura, da ditadura. Nós temos pessoas agora, nesse momento, na rua, não estão pedindo recontagem de voto. Eles estão pedindo intervenção militar. Eles não são democratas. E o pior é que as pessoas querem negociar com eles hoje. E nós estamos num país em que foi o último país a acabar com a escravidão, e os negros não foram incorporados na nossa sociedade. Eu, hoje, sou professor doutor, mas eu sou filho de uma mulher que era analfabeta, até 1980, de um pai que tinha 4ª série. E é o que é a realidade da maioria dos professores doutores hoje. É o quanto nós estamos atrasados. Eu, quando eu assisti o seu filme, como sempre, eu fico com muita raiva. Por quê? Porque ele mostra, por exemplo, a desgraça que foi a Bélgica mostra um pouquinho lá daquelas pessoas que tiveram as mãos cortadas por ordem do rei da Bélgica. Eu odeio a Bélgica por conta disso, não quero saber. Pode ser que eu odeie o Estado belga e não os belgas, mas porque não é possível a gente ficar olhando para isso e ter tanta tolerância, né? É óbvio que eu gostei, acho importantíssimo, né? E hoje, só para me encerrar, o que nós estamos notando é que a importância negra no Brasil está vindo de fora. Está vindo dos filmes norte-americanos, está vindo de série, né? E não daqui. Aqui a gente produz muito pouco, né? Muito. Eu, lá em Tocantinópolis, todo ano procuro passar filmes sobre a questão racial, e hoje em dia está difícil encontrar filmes brasileiros que falam sobre isso. A gente encontra norte-americanos, europeus e etc. Né? E que a gente tem que dizer, é muito importante. Queria agradecer o Omar por ter feito essa proposta e vocês que aceitaram, e agradecer você, né, a sua importância no seu filme, que as pessoas começam a entender e começar a ver um pouco mais essa relação. Eu não falo lá só da África, não. Eu falo daqui. Falo como preto, que tem que ter medo de viver nesse país. Eu sei hoje que eu estou andando e metade do país me quer morto. Isso é muito terrível. É isso.
Well, thank you for those great, strong words, and it's one of the reasons why I accepted Omar's invitation as well. Because I try not to go too much and concentrate to my work and not to travel too much. But I knew exactly that in Brazil a lot still need to change, and especially after those last elections. And this problem is even bigger than Brazil. You talked about democracy, you know, what it has become. And it's a question that the whole Western world needs to ask themselves. You know, what has become to democracy? Because we cannot say that we are still living in a normal democracy, if it was ever normal, where you question everything, you question science, you question reality, you question justice. And it's everywhere like this. You know, you see it in Brazil, but you see it in the so-called biggest democracy of the world, the United States. You know, you have at least half the electorate basically voting for a crazy white supremacist. In France, if you count all the extreme right votes, you have more than 40% who vote for right extremists. And you know, most of them, I don't feel they are my enemy. I just feel they are totally surrendered themselves to ignorance. You know, that's what it is. It's ignorance. Ignorance and fear. Fear of the reality. Fear of confronting what they have been taught and, you know, believed all these years for generation and generation. So to face that, to face the mirror, is something that is terrible. You know, to the one thing you were hanging to, which is the color of your skin, which doesn't mean anything. When you lose that, you know, it's terrible. It's frightening. And yeah, and I see that all over the world. It's a very, very dark moment where we have to come up with new ways to get out of that thing, because once you lose all the, how do you say it?
Operate?
Well, if you lose your boundaries, you know, where, you know, words don't mean the same thing anymore. You know, when, you know, fake news, what does it mean? You know, alternative reality, you know, all those terms where you don't even have a common vocabulary. You know, we are in an incredible decadence. And we did not start now, it started at least in the 70s. We are seeing it now and accelerated by new technologies, but it has been there for a long time. And so you are in a space of intelligence, and you should know that that's maybe the only tools that you have left, and use that intelligence, you know. And when I was in universities, my teachers were in the streets with me. You know, there was a much more engaged academia, and they have, you know, create a bubble now. And I say that in the US, I visit a lot of universities as well. You know, it has become protected walls, you know, and it has nothing else to do with society, you know, and I think that's the beginning of the end. If you guys don't react to that, you know, you are supposed to be the non-ignorant part of society. So the tools that you have, you need to really put it at the service of the society, not at your service, but at the service of society. That's what society, you know, build those buildings. So you have to give that back to society, whoever they are. Okay, I won't preach anymore.
Rafael?
Diretor, mais cedo você citou Marx. Mais cedo você citou Marx e eu lembrei do começo de Extermínio de Todos os Brutos, que você diz que a história é fruto do poder e o poder é crucial para a história. E também da forma como você se posiciona no filme, não como neutro, mas como parte dessa história em curso, desse processo continuado com agentes e narradores. E você também falou sobre o papel da ficção. E eu queria saber, de Extermínio de Todos os Brutos, como foi, o que tem por trás da decisão criativa de escolher um único ator branco para representar diferentes personagens em diferentes processos históricos ao longo da narrativa do filme.
Só lembrando que Exterminator Brutes está sendo exibido na FCM. Para quem não viu, muita gente, ele vai ser exibido amanhã, o primeiro episódio, às 14 horas. E aí, Teve uma sessão hoje, acho que lá na UFCM. Mas não teve? Você esteve lá no passado?
Lembrei de mais uma pergunta. Também queria que você comentasse um pouco de qual que é o papel de Marx, assim, da obra de Marx na sua trajetória.
First of all, Exterminate All the Brutes is based on three important books, you know, of Roxane Dunbar, artist, about the indigenous history, Michel Rolf Trouillot, about the making of history, on silence part of history. So it's a very important book that was my guide. And Sven Lindqvist, a Swedish author, journalist, who traveled the world. And those three works were the basis of the film. And what you quote at the beginning is from Michel Rolf Trouillot, you know, and it's a very central and important study of what history is, you know, what is taught history and what have been silenced and by whom. So the white character in the movie is, of course, a metaphor and a symbol of different epoch, of different timeline, and represent the figure of the anchorman, the hunchman, you know, and I chose specifically an American actor who people would never take as a bad guy. You know, I wanted really the most gentle and good guy figure of American cinema, and Josh Hartnett, who luckily is a friend and knew what I was asking of him, accepted to play that role. And it, you know, and that's a character you find in most American stories, of most, you know, Western stories, who commit crimes. Sometimes it's sees as crime, but sometimes it's just revenge, or, you know, as the anchorman bringing justice. And I wanted to use that character throughout the film and be a link throughout those different locations, different countries, different timeline, and become a character with it's his own story, you know, and see how, you know, at the end he is facing the reality of his act. That's an important subject for me in all my films where there is violence. It is also always important for me to see that, to show that that violence is not a pathological violence. It's clear eye violence, that whoever commit violence, I want to show his eyes, because it's a decision. It's not craziness, it's rational violence. And I always make sure in all my films there is no bad guys. It's somebody that could be you. And I want you to feel that. And to be aware of that. That, you know, you think sometimes you're in a good role, but, you know, barbarity it's very easy to fall into that. And so the George Hartnett character is that, and he commits suicide at the end, like the character in the novel of Conrad, you know, who also, you know, said, burn everything, you know. And so that was the analogy. So, and Marx, you know, I've been very open to that fact that the two people who really make who I am, and I was lucky very early in my life to learn to read. Their work was James Baldwin and Karl Marx, and my structure was formed by that, and Marx, you know, whatever the political of what they have been stealing from him and do something totally wrong and different to the essence of his reflection. He's an incredible philosopher, an incredible historian, an incredible economist, and I use his work today, every day of my life, you know, and help me ask the good question, especially when I'm lost in interpreting a situation, and it works. You know, and Baldwin is the same on a more, you know, humanistic way. But yes, they frame every single one of my work.
Olá, boa tarde. Estou também sem graça de fazer minha pergunta depois dessas questões todas filosóficas e políticas, mas eu vou fazer mesmo assim. Eu gostei.
Você acabou a bateria.
Can you hear?
Can you repeat the translation?
Posso falar?
Okay, can you,
Ok. Bom, eu vou fazer uma pergunta que não é tão filosófica quanto as anteriores, mas é porque eu gostei muito do texto, da narração e da forma como você fez a narração, a sua voz. E eu gostaria que você contasse um pouco como foi esse processo. Eu trabalho com cinema também e sempre achei muito difícil construir esse tipo de texto em primeira pessoa, e o processo de fazer isso sempre é muito complexo e é muito... Não sei o que você lembra desse processo, como é que foi construir esse texto, se foi em cima das imagens, que dica você daria para uma pessoa que está trabalhando num texto agora, no caso eu?
There are many aspects of that that I developed all along my films. The writing itself is always a work in progress. There are sentences in that film that I've written while I was shooting or while I have a journal that I have always there. Some of them were 10 years old of stuff I written that I revisit, and I change words while I am editing. You know, it's always a back and forth between what is happening while you're filming, what you're reading while you're filming, what you're feeling when you're editing, until the last day, until the mix. You know, I can change one word in the sound mix because the music is not the right music. So you have to see it. It's not a neutral voice. It's not a text that, you know, is just written once for all. It's something that is alive, that form until maturity. And it's like a poem, you know, it's like working on a poem again and again until the poem is right, until each vibe, you know. Yeah. So it's not an academic text, it's a mixture of many different things, and yeah, it's music as well. You know, that sometimes I change a word because I know that the audience will not hear it well, that it will be confusing. So I change it to a word that can be understood rapidly, because the film is not a book, it's one time. So, I carve it until I feel it's perfect. So it's a long process, and it's never ending.
Só mais duas questões e nós vamos terminar. Então agora é o Heitor. Heitor? E depois a Sofia. E aí a gente termina.
Ok, está dando para me ouvir? Eu gostaria de agradecer pela presença do cineasta Raoul Peck aqui, parabenizar pelo filme. E eu tenho duas perguntas. A primeira é uma pergunta mais simples. Eu assisti o filme de 2000 sobre o Lumumba também, e a cena final me impactou muito. Quando tem uma cerimônia no Palácio do Mobutu, em Kinshasa, eu acho, e tem vários chefes de Estado lá, autoridades, e ele é aplaudido. E um homem se recusa a aplaudir, e esse homem usa uma boina vermelha e um uniforme militar e tem um bigode. Ele é o Tomás Sankara?
Wow.
Não.
It was a weird impact, but it's good that you. Yes, it was a sort of symbolic sign of Mobutu seeing his future, seeing the man that will probably kill him or get rid of him. It was history repeating itself. That's what I wanted to leave it open, you know, and in fact it was not only a man, it was a couple.
Yes.
It was a soldier with a red cap and a young woman, and they were not applauding, and they were looking at Mobutu in the eye. And for me that was like the sign that you can kill whoever you want, but there will be new young people to rise up and to confront you. That was the meaning of it.
Muito obrigado. E a segunda pergunta é mais filosófica, assim, mais introspectiva, mais reflexiva mesmo, assim, sobre como o discurso colonialista permanece nos dias de hoje, principalmente na Europa, por meio dos veículos de mídia, por meio das narrativas jornalísticas, por meio das reportagens sobre a África. E eu lembro muito do livro do Aimé Césaire, O Discurso contra o Colonialismo, e dizer que a Europa é imperdoável, e lembrei também com a frase que deu o título do seu filme, Extermine Todos os Brutos, do final do livro O Coração das Trevas, né, do Joseph Conrad. Se não tem um certo impulso de morte no horror que é o colonialismo, a frase do personagem é o horror, ou uma coisa meio irracional, ou se é uma certa por interesse por dinheiro também, o que move esse colonialismo até hoje, e como ele se renova no discurso midiático, como ele se renova a lógica dos políticos, né, de extrema-direita na Europa hoje em dia, né, como eles mantêm uma fachada democrática, mas defendem as ideias mais reacionárias e mais imperialistas e colonialistas até o dia de hoje, e como combater esse discurso por meio da arte, por meio também de livros da academia, não sei, como impedir que esse discurso colonialista avance e perdure até o futuro e os dias atuais, né? Enfim.
How much time you have? Well, it's, you know, first of all, you should not extract yourself from the problem. You are part of the problem as well. So it's not something academic that you can watch from afar. You know, those are questions that you should ask yourself, for yourself. What is your role? Especially you're in a media institute. You know, you are the one who are going to work in the media. You are the gatekeepers. You are the gatekeepers of truth. You know, and what will be your choice when you come out of here? You know, that's a really personal question. You know, so you're not out of the system; you're inside the system. So and the rest. That's why I made exterminate all the brutes. You know, it's everything is in that film. If you want to understand that, it's 4 hours of film where you know, I go to the bottom of that story, and we have, you know, I've said in another film. I don't think you show it. The title is A Prophet and Nothing But. It's a film I did in 2000, and one of the leitmotiv of the voice was capitalism have won, you know, or capitalism have said it have won. But it was a time where all media worldwide were bought by millionaires, by big companies. So it's nothing new today. It just became worse. But that's a whole history since, I would say, the First World War and accelerated after the Second World War. The medias were bought by millionaires. It was always, how to say, people always thought that the press was free. Press was never free. And they are the one who choose the word, who choose the stories. And today, it's even worse. A few billionaires own world press. Look at Murdoch, look at Musk with Twitter, you know, and you could see all the connection through different companies, whether it's television, newspapers, or social media, you know. So we are way behind. We don't exist.